I would ask the first question, how did Moldova develop after the dissolution of the USSR, and what are the main challenges today?
Well, indeed, it's a good question, and as we just recently celebrated 30 years of our independence, and indeed this occasion provided an opportunity to reflect on the developments in the country since 1991. In a snapshot, I would say that after 30 years, Moldova still faces a lot of challenges in terms of democratic development and the rule of law. We had series of reforms that have been conducted, and unfortunately, in spite of this effort, as I mentioned, the state of affairs in rule of law and the functioning of the democracy is facing a lot of challenges. However, I would say that the fact that Moldova became more active in terms of getting closer to European Union, getting closer to and implement European values of democracy. Of course, that made Moldova look much more European, not in terms of geography, but in terms of developments. And I think even though this path of 30 years was full of challenges, today we can definitely say that Moldova is much more closer to Europe, both in terms of trade. Our trade is very much connected to Europe. Over 65% of our trade exports go to Europe, to European Union. Half of the imports are coming from the European Union, and this is pretty much thanks to the CFTA and association agreement with the European Union. And at the same time, the fact that the Europeanization process of the country, even though we had a lot of challenges, I mentioned, I think the urbanization process started to have lately a bit of different dimension, a dimension where the citizens in the country started to appreciate the importance of the values and started to better distinguish in the political discourse in the countries politicians who really are pro-reform and come with solutions that can change the country to ensure development of the country. And this is pretty much, as I mentioned, was already observed over the last electoral processes in the country, which I think also is an element of a difference, because previously the country was very much, the citizens in Moldova were pretty much supporting geopolitical discourses of different politicians, pro-European, pro-Russians. But the reality is that they realized that it's not enough to support pro-Europeans or pro-Russians. It's more important to support their reform agenda and values which would really help to make the country more European in terms of the actions and not only in terms of statements and aspirations. And I think that is important because we see now that this dividing line within the society is already somehow disappearing, and the last presidential elections, the parliamentary elections, show that as a fact that citizens started really to appreciate these elements of reform, which in the end it actually means more prosperity, more security, and more importantly address the impunity and ensure justice in the country.
You talked a bit about the European Union and about the influence of the European Union. So let me ask you, when it comes to the geopolitical situation in Moldova, also consider the conflict with Transnistria, how do you see this situation, this geopolitical situation in Moldova? Is it more pointed to the east or to the west? And also maybe how do you assess Moldova's future when it comes to EU relations and Russia relations?
Well, as I already hinted, I think the experience of being an independent country of 30 years made our citizens to better distinguish the strategic interests or the interests, the national interests. And when it comes to the current developments in the country and the current state of affairs, I mean, it's obviously it's very difficult to challenge the fact that Moldova is a European country, not only in terms of geography, as I mentioned, or the language we speak, which is the Romanian language, or the aspirations that the citizens have. Now we have almost 63% of the citizens, according to the last public opinion poll issued in June, over 63% say that they would like Moldova to join the European Union, which is a bit of improvement in perceptions of the citizens. Before the support for European integration in the last 7 to 8 years was a bit different. There was more or less a divided perception of those who are supporting joining Moldova EU or those who want to have better ties with Russia. So this is the trend now. There is a change in trend, and exactly because people in Moldova learned that and understood the added value of not only sharing European values, but also looking for the models of development. And looking at the models of development, you have the European model of development, you have kind of more type of kind of Eastern or Russian type of development linked to the past more. So people started to see the difference, and they really understood that for Moldova, this track of development provides more benefits in terms of the security, in terms of justice, in terms of infrastructure and connectivity, in terms of trade. So all this indicates to the fact that in spite of various geopolitical discourses and options of the citizens to the east, to the west, the majority of the population connect themselves to Europe. And even in Transnistrian region, 75% of the trade from the region is directed towards European Union. And this is very much thanks to the fact that the CFTA and association agreement is implemented across the country, even though we have this unresolved conflict, but the companies in the region benefit from it. So, in fact, these opportunities that are provided to Moldova by our relationship with Europe are opportunities that all the citizens and entities are benefiting. Yeah, when we have now over almost 80% of the population benefiting also from the visa-free travel to the European Union. Many of the citizens in the country had a chance not only to hear about Europe, but to travel freely to Europe. Irrespective again of their place of residence in Tiraspol or in Chisinau, right? So these are very concrete things that matters, and beyond this geopolitical discourse, I think this which makes a difference, and citizens see for themselves. And once EU is prioritizing that the relationship with Moldova should benefit the citizens, and this is not only the reforms, this is also assistance. This is also programs to support community development, civil society, SMEs development, media, local authorities. All this actually shows in figures that over the last 10 years, for example, almost 1.2 billion euros have been provided to Moldova as assistance support by the European Union. And I think that is something also that the citizens have seen. So this would be my answer to your question.